Let's talk about the Lost Caverns of Ixalan, best of the worst. Normally we'd be talking about the top 3 cards from that set that are seeing play in 1% or less of decks, according to EDH Rec since the set's release. Since it's the most recent set, we're going to bump that up to 6 because people haven't had time to adopt every card from the set. Coming in at number 6, we have Zoes Justice. For 1 in a red, we get an instant. The owner of target artifact or creature with mana value 1 or greater shuffles it into their library. Then that player discovers X, where X is its mana value. Zoes Justice isn't that exciting in a general sense, but where I do think this is interesting and underutilized is in mono red lists, where your only real option to deal with creatures is with direct damage spells. This lets you deal with any creature at quite a steep cost, but it is efficient mana-wise, and I think it's going to be good in those mono red lists. Coming in at number 5, we have Fabrication Foundry. For 1 in a white, we get an artifact with tap, add white. Spend this mana only to cast an artifact spell or activate an ability of an artifact source. 2 in a white, tap, exile 1 or more other artifacts you control with total mana value X. Return target artifact card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. Fabrication Foundry is only going to be good in the decks that really care about artifacts, but once you're there, this is going to be one of the better cards in your deck. It's a 2-mana mana rock, which is on rate. It's only good for ramping you into other artifacts, so you do want to make sure your deck has at least 35 artifacts, I'd say, maybe 40 before you put this in. But once you're there, Fabrication Foundry is going to be one of the best cards in your deck. Having a mana rock that has this additional mode of being able to recur your other things that you really care about in the deck is going to be very good, and I think this is being really underutilized. Coming in at number 4, we have cils Flanker. For 2 in a white, we get a 3/1 creature, Cat Warrior with Flash. When cils Flanker enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put a +1/+1 counter on cils Flanker for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. You gain 2 life and scry 2. Exile target player's graveyard. cils Flanker is really interesting because it gives you so many options at instant speed on a body. Where I think this is going to be really interesting is in a Blink style deck, where you can constantly reuse this enters the battlefield effect. What I think you're probably using it for most often is graveyard removal, just exiling a player's graveyard, but you will use it to scry 2, gain 2 life when you're just low on life or you need to dig deeper into your deck. So it's nice to have that option. And then the first option, which you probably won't use that often, is nice in the Blink deck because you're going to be running those Ghostway style effects where you blink your whole team and then bring them back down. And in those instances, cils Flanker actually sees all those creatures have left the battlefield, so it will come in with quite a large number of +1/+1 counters if you don't need to choose one of those other modes. Coming in at number 3, we have Bringer of the Last Gift. For 6 and 2 black, we get a 6/6 creature, Vampire Demon with Flying. When Bringer of the Last Gift enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put there this way onto the battlefield. Bringer of the Last Gift is Living Death stapled to a giant creature for 3 mana more. It's quite a bit of an investment and you do have to cast it in order to get its effect, so reanimating it isn't necessarily the best thing. However, if you're able to bring it back to hand from your graveyard, that could be really good. I think that it probably got overlooked because it does cost so much, but if we know anything about Living Death, it's the best card in the deck for the decks that it goes in. So if your deck really cares about self-mill and you're doing a lot of it, then consider Bringer of the Last Gift as a way to completely blow out your opponents. Coming in at number 2, we have Oare Patik, Deepest Epoch. For 2 and 2 blue, we get a 4/3 legendary creature God with Flying. Whenever you cast an instant spell from your hand, it gains Rebound. When Oare Patik dies, return it to the battlefield tapped and transformed under its owner's control with 3 time counters on it. On the back, it's Temple of Cyclical Time. Tap, add blue, remove a time counter from Temple of Cyclical Time. 2 and blue, tap, transform Temple of Cyclical Time, activate only if it has no time counters on it and only as a sorcery. Oare Patik does require a very specific deck in order to function, but once this thing is online, it's going to be one of the best cards in that deck. So if you have a deck that has at least 25 instants in it, I'd say take a look at Oare Patik and maybe slot it into your deck. Best of the worst is Sahili, the Sun's Brilliance. For blue and red, we get a 2/2 legendary creature, Human Artificer. Blue-red tap. Create a token that's a copy of another target creature or artifact you control, except it's an artifact in addition to its other types. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. Sahili is really excellent. I can't believe this isn't being utilized in more decks. It's 2 mana to get a 2/2 out. You pay 2 mana and tap it to make a copy of literally any creature or artifact you control, and you can do it at instant speed if you want to. It's a temporary copy, but who cares? As soon as you're in a deck that cares about enters the battlefield effects or any kind of artifact strategy, I think you can find some really silly shenanigans to do with this. I mean, just imagine copying a Phyrexian portal with this thing. That's the dream. But it can be good in any of those decks that have a bunch of artifacts or a bunch of creatures that have entered the battlefield effects. If you haven't tried Sahili the Sun's Brilliance in any of your decks that really cares about either of those things, I say give it a shot. Sahili is sweet. That's it for the Lost Caverns of Ixalan Best of the Worst. The cards that we found, I think, are still really excellent and powerful, even though people aren't playing them. What do you guys think of our picks?